Hey everyone, my name is Thomas, and today I'm going to be diving into something that I have been waiting for. I've been super excited ever since I took the survey myself. It's called the State of Agent Engineering, brought to you by LangChain. And so if we see here, we surveyed over 1,300 professionals, from engineers and product managers to business leaders and executives, to uncover the state of AI agents. Let's dive into the data and break down how AI agents are being used or not today. I do want to announce that I am a LangChain Ambassador now, and I do just want to go ahead and plug, if you haven't subscribed to me yet, go ahead and drop that subscription. I would love to have you here as a part of this community, and I'm starting to build this YouTube channel, starting to get more and more videos, and there's going to be much more agentic stuff in the future. And for context, I am a software engineer. I work with agentic systems on the daily, and I've been doing it since 2022. So super excited to be here, and I can't wait to dive into this report. Let's go! So if you're not familiar with what LangChain is, please check out some of my videos or just directly go to their website. But if you're in the AI space, you probably know what they are, who they are, and what they build. So let's go ahead and start inside the introduction here. So as we enter 2026, organizations are no longer asking whether to build agents, but rather how to deploy them reliably, efficiently, and at scale. And I've also been a part of this problem. In fact, I was probably one of the earlier ones trying to deploy agentic systems at scale. It all started with just mirror prompt chaining, but now we've delved into having tool calling agents, or even diving into things like deep agents that have a general purpose agent harness. But I digress. So, key findings. Production momentum is real, with 57% of respondents having agents in production, with large enterprises leading in adoption. Now, this is a key, stark difference between that article that was released earlier this year that said that all Gen AI projects are failing because they can't be done reliably at scale. And of course, right here, 57% of the respondents have agents inside production. Now, I am curious, for those that actually responded to this, what does that mean to be in production? Is it just a simple chatbot? Is it something that can actually reliably produce a quality output, right? Because that would be a huge difference. It's easy to put a chatbot out there that can give you free text and kind of be a nice little toy even internally, but when you start pushing to customers, that's when it really starts to matter. As we're speaking about it, quality is the production killer, with 32% citing it as a top barrier. And this is absolutely a barrier to entry. In fact, if you're going to be serious about deploying agents in 2026, you must be starting with evals. You don't actually need to start with an agent. You just need to understand your niche and understand what topic you're trying to solve for. That's actually the hardest problem here. It's understanding the process and seeing how people are actually in this thing and extracting the knowledge from them and then automating it. Whenever you finally can get that data or some sort of gold data set to evaluate against, then you can proceed with building the agent. Observability is table stakes. Nearly 89% of respondents have implemented observability for their agents, outpacing eval adoption at 52%. Now, this is actually more concerning. So observability, absolutely. This is a non-negotiable. I don't even think that anyone who is real is not going to sit there and try to use an agentic system or even really any software without some sort of observability. But adoption at 52% for evals, that's concerning. That to me makes me wonder about these 57% of respondents. So use multiple models as the norm. OpenAI leads with their GPT models, but Gemini, Claude, and open source models see significant adoption. Fine-tuning has not been widely adopted. I've never understood why fine-tuning is even a thing. I felt like it's something that the market was really rushed towards just because it felt right. Like, oh, I have my business domain problem, and the models aren't that good, so I'm going to put my business's data inside the model. But really, if we're being honest, the model is intelligent. It can understand most of everything you're going to say, and it has already all the skills necessary. You just need to give it your context, and that's going to be the harder part. That's why I don't think fine-tuning has really taken off. In addition, you don't want to have a ton of data to train this model to only use it for like 6 months until the next model comes out. So that's why I personally believe fine-tuning hasn't been widely adopted. And it's also just hard from the ML perspective to keep these things going, to have a pipeline that's readily available. Like, it's not easy. There are things like Amazon Bedrock that help with it, but regardless, let's keep going because I keep digressing. These points are just so juicy. So here's some insights here. So what is agent engineering? Agent engineering is the iterative process of harnessing LLMs into reliable systems. Got it. Because agents are non-deterministic, we believe engineers need to rapidly iterate to refine and improve agent quality. That is absolutely certain and true, both through online and offline evals, in my opinion. So large enterprises are leading adoption. This also makes sense. They're going to have probably the most talent, the most money to outsource for these types of things. But more than half of respondents surveyed, 57.3%, now have agents running in production environments, with another 30.4 actively developing agents with concrete plans to deploy them. Gotcha. This marks clear growth from last year's survey where 51% reported to have agents in production. Once again, little suspect there. Like, what do they mean by production? Organizations are moving past the proof of concept stage into production. The question for most organizations is no longer if they will ship agents, but how and when. Does your company currently have agents in production? So if we look at the 2025 respondents, 57.3% say yes. Now, this may be a little bit more skewed towards the enterprises and or people who assume that production is just having a chatbot, right? Like, I don't really know. But then we see here, no, but actively developing 30.4, and then absolutely not, just exploring, so 12.3. And this seems right on the mark, especially if you think of things like reliability of these agentic systems, having evals up front. That is a ton of work that not just regular software engineers can do. You really have to wear like several hats to get it done. What changes at scale? Of the 10K plus size orgs, 67% had agents production, with 24% actively developing with plans for production, versus the less than 100 size orgs, 50% had agents in production, with 36% actively developing them. This suggests larger organizations are moving faster from pilots to durable systems, perhaps driven by greater investment, exactly, in platform teams, security, and reliability infrastructure. I absolutely agree. This kind of harps on the point that I just made. To really have an agentic system, you have to wear many hats. You have to be a platform engineer. You have to deal with security and be concerned with it, at least at a high level. You have to understand your SOC 2s of the world or your ISO 27001s, right? You need to understand how to build reliable infrastructure. And that's on top of figuring out the problem inside of your domain and then building reliable agents with evals. So you're a software engineer, a product manager, a data scientist, and then also doing this thing around the platform and scalability. Like, you need to have all these hats, and you've had to have had history doing it well. And of course, these larger organizations have whole teams of this where they've developed inside developer tooling. So of course, they're going to naturally be a little bit leg up whenever it comes to this. So does your company currently have agents in production? So startup, say 50%, scale up, so 100 to 500, 50%. Wow, actually right on the money there. Mid-market, so 502K, 64%, upper mid-market, 53, and then enterprise, greater than 10K. That's where you start to see getting past that 50% threshold or well into the 50s, right? That 67%. It's interesting also that the mid-market ones are finding some success there. So that's just something to note. So if we look at the enterprise, no, just exploring, that's still right around 8%. Leading agent use cases. Customer service emerged as the most common use case, right at 27.5%, with research and data analysis close behind, 24%. Together, these two categories represent more than half of all primary agent deployments. And this is where I come to an interesting conclusion here, that my initial statement around the production usage, is it really just chatbots? Even though it says customer service, I did have the question here of, is this customer service meaning augmenting customer service roles? Is it helping internal customer service roles? Or is it customer service in a more broad sense? Like, does it even interact with the ending consumer? Like, I wonder what that really means, because customer service is somewhat of a loaded term, even in this case. But we see here customer service at 26.5, research and data analysis. Oh, okay. So internal productivity is a little bit different than that customer service then. So I take that back, right at 17.7, which this is an interesting depiction here. I would have assumed internal productivity would have been much higher, especially because the companies I've worked with have all tried to gather around use cases to enable internal productivity or to increase it. So this is kind of interesting seeing this at only 7.7 or 17.7%. Content generation, sales and marketing automation, and other. And this content generation can kind of be in the form of customer service, because in some of the agentic systems I've built, it would do things like generate memos. That is both customer service, but also content generation. Depending on what customer service actually means, in my aspect, I've been augmenting roles at companies. So giving those roles that we're trying to help augment more time to do other things that they want to do. So for example, if you want to kick off this parallel agent to work behind the scenes and do the tasks you would normally have to do that are monotonous and annoying and mundane, that's what I'm aiming for. So working with unstructured data and PDFs, working with those siloed tasks that you don't have to worry about anymore. The strong showing of customer service suggests a shift towards team putting agents directly in front of the customers. Gotcha. Not just using them internally. At the same time, agents continue to deliver clear value internally, with 18% citing using agents for internal workflow automation to boost employee efficiency. So this does certainly make sense, especially when you think of products like Glean or Microsoft Copilot. These things really boost that employee efficiency, and you can also hook right into them with plugins or everything like that. So the popularity of research and data analysis use cases further reinforces where agents shine today, synthesizing large volumes of information, reasoning across sources, and accelerating knowledge-intensive tasks. Absolutely. We saw a greater spread of use cases selected by respondents this year, and then they put the parentheses, respondents can only select one primary use case. So agent adoption may be diversifying beyond a narrowed set of early applications. Got it. So what changes at scale? Among organizations with 10K plus employees, internal productivity is the top use case. That makes sense. With customer service, 24.7%, and research and data analysis, 22.2% close behind. Larger enterprises may tend to focus first on driving efficiency across internal teams before or alongside deploying directly to end users. You're going to make your quickest bang for the quickest buck here. First, you're going to start internally to get the reps in. Secondly, it's much easier to deploy internally because then there's a lot more room for error. You know, if something goes wrong, that team just pings you and goes, hey, this thing didn't work. Right? Whereas if you're doing this in production, you have to have a whole team dedicated just understanding exactly what happened. Of course, you would have that for internal, but I'm just trying to say in general, you get a little bit faster iteration, a little bit more bang for your buck if you're doing internal. So that makes total sense, as a large enterprise company will have the resources to dedicate for that. Like they mentioned initially in this thread, perhaps by greater investment in platform team security and reliability infrastructure. Quality remains the biggest barrier to production, of course. Consistent with last year's findings, this year, 1/3 of respondents cited quality as their primary blocker. This encompasses accuracy, relevance, consistency, and the agent's ability to maintain the right tone and adhere to the brand or policy guidelines. So let me repeat this again. This year, 1/3 of respondents cited quality as their primary blocker. So I have a couple thoughts on this. So the first one is, do you feel uncomfortable shipping a large language model to production that would normally augment what a human could do? And you're concerned that maybe it doesn't get all the way to 100%? Or are we concerned that it's just non-negotiably not even doing the correct task, right? Because those are two different things. So for example, if your LLM can do, let's just say 75% of the work, but let's just say it does, of course, have a little bit of inaccuracies, a little bit of human in the loop necessary to get it back on track, then is that okay, right? So whenever someone's citing this as their primary blocker, are they blocking it because they want that 90 to 100%? Or is it actually that the LLM quality output sucks? And this may seem like the same thing, but it's not, because you can eval away and get towards that 90 to 95% most of the time for a lot of your majority of use cases. You have people out there that say, absolutely not, it should be as good as a deterministic system. But in my eyes, if you're still able to provide that value up front, then absolutely it is worth shipping it to production, even with human in the loop steps. But that is a must to have, is human in the loop steps. But yes, this probably falls in line with evals not being adopted as widely, because you need to have those upfront evals. I keep saying that over and over again. You're going to hear me repeat it. And then we see here, it's quality of outputs, latency, and response time, which is interesting. I would suspect this is because people want that instant gratification that the internet gives you. And that's just something we've all become accustomed to. You throw more server and compute, you get a faster response from your API. Good to go. We fixed the problem. But in this case, you have to actually rethink your agentic experience and kind of remove that idea that, oh, you're going to get it instantly. You need to actually tell them up front, hey, that's going to take a while. And you see these in things like ChatGPT Deep Research or other things that are like, hey, we're going to kick this thing in the background and we're just going to tell you when it's ready. And that actually is a whole nother product in of itself, kind of like that agent inbox idea, which, by the way, LangChain does have an idea of that, or at least have a project that showcases that agent inbox. Security and compliance is flagged at 16%, I guess. Deployment infrastructure at 13.9, which is interesting because fortunately, if you use LangGraph in production, this deployment infrastructure is actually handled for you. You just need to host it yourself. Now, that's a little naive of a take, but if you're deploying to serverless, so ECS Fargate, and you're using the Postgres checkpointer and things like that, you have reliability, you have durability already. This is something that I already take for granted because I just spin up LangGraph and it just works, and that's why I endorse LangChain and I'm an ambassador. But in general, this has not been that big of an issue. So it's great to see that this is much less than some of the other callouts. And then cost management, 12.8%, and then other 4.2%. Now, cost management, I would say, is a side to this. It's hard also to price these things. Do you price them based on usage and consumption? Do you price them based on outcomes? Like, what exactly do you charge for? That, to me, is a blocker, is like actually how to price your product that uses an LLM. So latency has emerged as the second biggest challenge in 20%. As agents move into customer-facing use cases like customer service and code generation, response time becomes a critical part of the user experience. This also reflects the trade-off between quality and speed for teams, as more capable, multi-step agents can deliver higher quality outputs, but often with slower responses. Like I mentioned before, this is absolutely okay in my opinion, as long as you give the expectation to your consumer that, hey, you're kicking this off and it's helping you do like 80% of your work. I'm willing to bet that that person kicking it off is going to say, okay, that's great. Like from a product perspective, of course, that's going to be a win, especially if they can just come back, do a couple human in the loop things via queued interrupts or whatever. And it goes, yep, you're good. We just automated half your day's work. That is a win. So I would just say question the need to be instant gratifying. In contrast, cost is less frequently cited as a concern than in previous years. Good. Falling model prices and improved efficiency appear to have shifted attention away from raw spend, with organizations prioritizing making agents work well and fast. It's actually interesting because even though these models may cost more, and even though, yes, the model prices have decreased, they're producing more quality output, therefore being able to do your task quicker. So in a way, it's actually cheaper all around. So what changes at scale? So among enterprises, 2K plus employees, quality remains a top blocker, but security emerges as the second largest concern, cited by 24.9% of respondents. That checks out. Surpassing latency, which is more commonly a challenge for smaller organizations. So they're saying here that smaller organizations have the latency issues, whereas the larger organizations do not cite it as number two. It's that security. It is human nature to be risk adverse. So, of course, the naysayers of generative AI are absolutely going to say, hey, it can generate anything. We're not going to push that out to production. No way. You need to have evals up to like 98% to make sure that we don't have it go off the rails at all. And we're going to block this unless you have like the most guardrails possible. And this is something that I've seen time and time again. You have to talk those types of people down, and you have to work with them to say, no, there's a human. It's auditable. You can understand exactly what the agent did. It's using the permissions of the user that kicked it off, right? There's ways that you can work around this where it doesn't necessarily have to be a blocker, especially if you're on a parallel track to get it SOC 2 verified and get your production environments checkboxed for whatever test that you need to run. Yeah, this is a common blocker that I've seen. Is it's actually not the AI is the problem, it's the people that block it because they're risk adverse. So we see here latency, security, deployment infrastructure, much lower across the board in this case. Orgs with 10K plus employees write in responses pointed to hallucinations and consistency of outputs generated by agent as the biggest challenge in ensuring agent quality. Of course. Many also cited ongoing difficulties with context engineering and managing context at scale. I 100% agree with this. Context engineering and context management is the hardest part about this. Once again, I've had more of the luxury of working in the back-end side of things, so background agents that do tasks for you that kind of resolve things to JSON at the end of the day and work through some sort of like subgraph to subgraph with subagent to subagent. So thinking about this in terms of an open text field, absolutely understand the difficulty there, especially trying to eval what a customer can potentially say. There's just in number of dimensions that can go beyond. Observability for agents, the ability to trace through multi-step reasoning chains and tool calls has become table stakes for agents. Yep, 89% of organizations have implemented some form of observability for their agents. That's awesome. And 62% have detailed tracing that allows them to inspect individual agent steps and tool calls. This is actually better than I thought it would be. So 62% say absolutely yes, I can trace individual. 26.4% yes, but only basic logs and metrics. So I'm assuming this is like application side logging, maybe through Datadog, maybe not something that's like LLM centric, or maybe they don't have open telemetry, right? And then no, 11.2%. Wow. So 11.2% of people say, no, we don't have anything. We throw that thing in prod and hope for the best. Fingers crossed, YOLO. That's insane to me. But yeah, these two make much more sense. And this is actually a great trend here. If you have agents in production, you need to have the traces. Absolutely. Speaking from the trenches, I didn't have tracing at one point and it was awful. Customers would complain and you wouldn't even know what happened. Now, this is a blocker. Working inside of an enterprise, we couldn't have trace level logs that had potential PII in them. So how do you send traces where people are typing in conversations and pressing enter that could potentially be filled with PII? Like, how do you manage that? How do you lock down that system? And that was something that hadn't been solved for the enterprise that I was working at before. And I absolutely understand that being a blocker. Evaluation and testing for agents. This is another interesting note. So while observability is more widely adopted, agent evals are still catching up and gaining more awareness. That is depressing. Just over half of organizations, 52.4%, report running offline evaluations on test sets, indicating that many teams see the importance of catching regressions and validating agent behavior before deployment. I would hope so. I would hope this would be like your number one thing you want to do. Why would you ever want to try to release an agent without even trying to understand if it's going to solve the problems? That's like trying to release a product that you don't even know if it's going to work. That's interesting to me. Adoption of online evals is lower. Okay, that's fine. But growing as teams start to monitor real world agent performance. So for those that don't know, offline evaluations, that's you running massive evals using some sort of framework of your choosing. You can even home roll your own one if you want, doesn't matter. Point is, you want to do these offline evals and test your different scenarios. So for my case, we have multiple subgraphs within a larger agentic flow. And some of these subgraphs are agents that call tools. Some of them are just deterministic, and LangGraph helps us with all of that. But point is, we have offline evals for all of that. So not just unit tests, not just integration tests, which are more application level. Then we have individual offline evals where we run against a whole suite. And if a new model comes out, it's pretty trivial to go like, let's select a new model, runs the whole thing again if we want, or we can select individual components. So online evals are where you're getting these traces and you're able to add a trace directly into some sort of data set. And you can even annotate these things on the fly. You can have an LLM read, let's just say batches of 50 requests that just came in or 50 new traces, and then try to rank them and then put them to a queue for later evaluation. That's that online evals. I'm actually in the category of not doing this yet. This is something I want to explore and I do agree with. The only thing that's blocking me here is just more work of doing it. So I'll get to it eventually, but the offline evals were good enough to give us the confidence before going to production in my case. Evaluation practices likely mature for those who already have agents in production, right? As overall evals adoption is meaningfully higher, of course. Not evaluating drops from 29.5% to 22.8%. Still kind of high though. So for those that have agents in production, you're telling me 22.8% said we're not evaluating them? Once again, makes me question the validity of this agent in production, okay? But we also see more organizations running online evals, okay, suggesting that once agents face real users, teams need to observe production data to detect issues in real time, of course. And this is where I would drop that LangChain does have a product for this. It's called LangSmith. It is actually a really nice interface. They've made a lot of improvements lately. I would definitely recommend checking it out, especially their latest drop of Poly, which is like a little agent that it can talk to, and it's a deep agent underneath the hood, and it'll pull traces that you're trying to talk about or threads or whatever. So what do you evaluate agents on, given you have agents in production? So this was the difference. So this is people that just in general evaluate agents on, and then agents in production. So yeah, this offline is a little bit more, but what's much more is that online evaluation. So there's many more evaluation or online evaluations once you get them into production, which makes most sense. Especially for those that have worked for production agents, you're going to want to eval them even online. And I even have a need for that myself. I just haven't got to it. And so if we see offline, online, offline plus online, 25%. So I mean, that's actually pretty good. That's higher than I thought. But the offline, that's very surprising to me that this is not higher. These organizations running evals also rely on a mix of human and automated approaches for evaluation. Yep. Implementing LLM as a judge for breadth and human review for depth. More broadly, human review, 59.8%, remains essential for nuanced or high-stakes situations, while LLM as a judge approaches 53.3%, are increasingly used to scale assessments of quality, factual accuracy, and guideline adherence. In contrast, traditional ML metrics like Rogue and Blue, which I personally don't know what these are, see limited adoption. These may be less suitable for open-ended agent interactions where multiple valid responses exist. Of course, the cost is high because you have humans involved. And the traditional ML DS metrics, I'm sure that this isn't as widely adopted because those that are entering into this may not have data or traditional ML and data science backgrounds. They're like software engineers like me who got displaced into agents. And now we're kind of trying to figure out this data science-y thing, right? Or at least that's how I feel personally. So I just want to harp on one additional thing here, which is LLM as a judge. Be very mindful of using this as some sort of criteria because LLM as a judge itself, because it's an LLM, you could guess it, it can hallucinate. And it actually be biased towards something else, especially from your framing or your prompt of it. So just be mindful when you're using this as an off-the-shelf evaluator to double check it, right? You almost need to have an eval for your LLM as a judge evaluator. But I will say LLM as a judge for online evals. So as the traces are coming in from your production environments, automatically classifying them like up, down, is it good, is it bad? This is where I feel that they're more applicable, but your mileage may vary in this case. So model and tool landscape. More than 2/3 of organizations report using OpenAI's GPT models. Yet model diversity is the norm, with over 3/4 using multiple models in production or development. Ain't the pain real, guys? Teams increasingly route tasks to different models based on factors like complexity, cost, and latency rather than going for a platform lock-in. Absolutely agree. I have personally used two separate providers, and I'm getting kind of confused here because there's the model and there's the provider. So OpenAI, for example, is the provider, and they provide the ChatGPT models, right? Or so the GPTs of the world. But then there's technically like Amazon Bedrock as a provider, but yet is not technically on this list. The thing is with Amazon Bedrock and the Azure, I think it's called the Model Foundry, you're going to have the guarantees and you'll have multiple models to select from in one unified API. And so that to me seems like the clear winner, especially Amazon Bedrock having like model call or failbacks that you can just, hey, if this Claude one is not working, fail to this one. And they even have like regional failovers now to where you can do even more limits. But, there's nuances there. So I would just say for this one in particular, it's like model and tool. I would rather see one for providers and I want to see one for models because I'm actually interested in both. But it seems like here, OpenAI with the GPTs are 67.8%. So they were the first movers in this space, so that would make sense. Then Google Gemini is actually pretty high. This is actually higher than I thought it would be. I would have assumed Claude is over Gemini, but maybe that's just my biased take. And then, of course, Claude comes in third, and then open source models. Honestly, pretty high too. A third of orgs report investing in the infrastructure and expertise required to deploy their own models. Yeah, exactly. This, if you're a startup, no, absolutely non-negotiable. If I'm getting a Series A funding of like $3 to $8 million, the last thing I want to do is hire an expert for $500,000 a year to try to house my own models just for the sake of saying we house our own models that are likely going to suck when compared against the commercial APIs. So that to me is insane. I would not prioritize that like ever, but I get it. Like I get why people would want to trend that way. This open source model adoption may be driven by high volume cost optimizations. Okay, I can see that. Data residency and sovereignty rights or sovereignty requirements. Yeah, I see that. Or regulatory constraints in sensitive industries. I don't see this. So once again, you can get by these regulatory constraints if you use something like Amazon Bedrock. And I swear I'm not trying to be an Amazon shill here, but at the end of the day, they give you that guarantee. They don't train any of their stuff. You can hand over your enterprise clients who are likely using AWS, the Bible that says, hey, we do not do this. Here's our SOC 2 report. Here's our ISO 27001. Here's our et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the security tests. So I would push on that a little if I was inside of these organizations. Like, are you sure you're not just constraining yourself? Data residency and sovereignty requirements. This is true. I have done multi-region model deployments as well. Not deploying my own models, but using models outside of the region. One thing on Amazon Bedrock in particular here is that you have to be mindful of limits are different in geographical locations. What may work really well in the US regions and what you have more allocation for you will not be the same in Europe, which is like a nightmare of the hardware battles there, by the way. And then maybe driven off a high volume cost optimization. I can see this. I've done higher volume cost optimizations by doing some sort of OCR to LLM, but I know not in every situation you're going to have that convenience, so that makes sense. At the same time, fine-tuning remains specialized, not standardized. Yep. A majority of organizations, 57%, are not fine-tuning models, instead relying on base models combined with prompt engineering and RAG, as it should be, in my opinion. This is the quickest bang for your buck. Anything else is going to take yet another budget, yet another round of approvals, yet another like SOC 2 auditing report, yet another security review with all the different companies you're working with because it's your own model. It's not Claude, right? And you don't have those model cards that you can just lean on. Because what if you poison your own model by mistake with your data that sucks? So there's like a whole can of worms there that fine-tuning really opens that I would hate to go down. Since fine-tuning requires significant investment in data collection, labeling, training, infrastructure, and ongoing maintenance, yep, it seems to be reserved for mostly high-impact or specialized use cases. I would love to know what those specialized use cases are, because I have yet to see them. Yes, and use heavily in production. Wow, so 13.8%. I would love to talk to those people. I want to actually know. Like, I'm not even trying to be facetious. I would love to know what I'm not thinking about. What agents are being used daily? Oh, this is a good one. I actually didn't realize this was on this report. So when we ask what agents do you use the most in your day-to-day, a few clear patterns emerged from the write-in responses. Coding agents dominate daily workflows. And of course, you're going to be a little bit biased because the people answering these questions are the ones building those production agents are likely also using these types of tools. So that makes sense. But by far, the most commonly mentioned agents were coding assistants. Yep. Respondents repeatedly cited tools like Claude Code, Cursor, GitHub Copilot, Amazon Q. Wow, I would not expect that. Okay. Windsurf and anti-gravity? That's just because it was newer. As a part of their everyday development loop, whether it was for code generation, debugging, test creation, or navigating large databases. I guess I should cut Amazon Q some slack. Like if you're already in the Amazon ecosystem and you're using it every day, they really do push it on you. And maybe it does have its good use cases, especially on the CLI, so I hear. So you have Claude Code, 120 plus mentions. This is actually the one I use. It's my daily driver as well. I do not use Cursor, but I can see why it's advantageous to use. GitHub Copilot, I also use this, but strictly just for, and maybe I don't know if it's considered the Copilot still, but the auto or the completion on the line. So if I ever have to open up my IDE, then I will let the intelligent auto completion happen with the GitHub Copilot. And then ChatGPT at 65 plus mentions. And then secondly, research and deep research agents are the next model used. Got it. The second most common pattern was research and deep research agents powered by ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Perplexity, and similar tools. These agents are used to explore new domains, summarize long documents, and synthesize information across sources. They're often used as a companion to coding agents in the same workflow. I can see that. Custom agents built on LangChain and LangGraph are also popular. I love this. I love that they're calling this out. Well, the people who are likely going to answer this survey are also probably in the ecosystem, so it's a little bit biased, but agreed. In fact, if you are thinking about building something reliable at scale, LangGraph is like a must-have. LangChain, you could probably live without, or you can use whatever your other type of like agentic framework is. But just know that LangChain interops really well with LangGraph now, since LangGraph is the foundation on LangChain. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I made a video called Why LangChain Doesn't Suck Anymore, and I would recommend you watch that. So we're finally at the end of the survey. Methodology. The insights from this report were aggregated from a public survey that we ran for 2 weeks. Yep, I did participate in it. November 18th through December 2nd, 2025. We received 1,300 responses. Here are some of the demographic data. So top 5 industries: technology, that makes sense. So financial services, that was me a year ago. Healthcare, that's me now. Education, interesting that this shows up as a top category. So 4%. Consumer goods, 3%. And then manufacturing, 3%. Oh, wow. So most people that took this survey are working at a company with less than 100 people. I don't know if that speaks more volumes to the fact that agentic software doesn't need as many people now, or if this just speaks that more the hype train is on these newer startups. I would say I fit in this one, which is around 18% of respondents. But if I would have taken the survey a year ago, I would have been actually at this spot, the 9% of respondents. So thank you so much, LangChain, for putting out this state of agent engineering. I enjoyed reading through it. I enjoyed giving my insights. If you all did as well, please go ahead and drop a like and subscribe if you haven't.